welcome back to Reading with Mani. I'm Mani and today I'm bringing you my March/April wrap-up. I've been doing these bi-monthly, especially because in January I only read 2 books and I was like, why would I do a wrap-up for 2 books? But I'm thinking that if I keep this pace up, like of 6, 7, 8 books a month, I might have to do it monthly, but yes. Now, between those 2 months, I read 13 books. So yeah, we have quite a lot of books to talk about, and I do tend to get quite rambly when I'm talking about them, so let's get into it. I have my journal here to try to help me remind myself of the order in which I read things and also like the notes I took, because I find that then I rewatch what I said and I was like, but I forgot to say this, and that's not good. So if you see me looking at this, that's why. In March and in April, I participated in readathons, in 3 readathons actually, between the 2 months. So yeah, I'll leave all the information down below. I'm gonna just go into it. You can watch my TBR videos to see which book fits each prompt, because honestly, I'm not gonna remember to tell you what prompt it fit, so yeah. Just in case, I always leave the information for the books I read, like at least the Goodreads link, in case you want to find out more about these books, because sometimes I do a bad job of explaining what a book is about. So yeah, that information is always down below. Anyway, I've been now rambling for 3 minutes, so let's just talk about some books, shall we? I have to say though, first, it's getting close to winter here. I mean, we're still in the middle of autumn, but still getting quite chilly. So I'm here with my fuzzy blanket, as I usually am, and I also have a little cat on my lap, so that's always good. Anyway, back to the books. So the first book I read in March was How High We Go in the Dark. I'll put a picture up here because I read it digitally, and that is by Sequoia Nagamatsu. Now, I love this book, 5 stars, just right off the bat, I can tell you that. I thought it was very compelling. The writing style was beautiful, kind of lyrical at times, so that already is a plus for me. And then you had the premise in which there's this deadly virus unleashed on Earth because of the permafrost in the northern hemisphere, like the Arctic melting, and so we have this virus killing everyone and nobody knows how to deal with it. So pandemics, yay. Anyway, so we follow different stories throughout the years as the illnesses mutate, and we have, in each story we have like a different way of coping with death, illness, grief, which I thought were very interesting themes to discuss. There's a lot of Japanese culture references as well, because I believe the writer is either Japanese or Japanese parents. Can't remember right now, but yes, there's definitely Japanese influence on this, and it's very interesting. I found that the depictions of grief and death rituals were super interesting, and how they evolved as the illness also evolved. And as a person who just wants to be cremated and then, I mean, I want to donate, I want my organs to be donated and then just cremate the rest of me, and that's fine by me. So yeah, I found that super interesting to read about. But yeah, it was very hopeful by the end, even though it is a really heavy book in terms of the themes that it discusses, but by the end it was very hopeful. We go kind of like full circle. I'm not gonna say why, because there's sort of mystery going on there also, which fascinating. And there's also space exploration in one chapter, which was amazing. So all in all, like my kind of sci-fi book, I would say. 5 stars, loved it. I think I said everything I wanted to say about this book, so let's move on to the next one. The next one was also a digital read. It's by TJ Klune, Under the Whispering Door. It's the book that came out last year. Finally managed to read it. I read it in like a couple of days. I remember I was in bed for most of it because I had low pressure, so I was like just reading all day basically. I really loved it. I didn't love it as much as The House on the Cerulean Sea, which I read last year, and I was one of my favorites of the whole year. But yes, I still really enjoyed it, gave it 4 stars. This one is also about death and grief, so you can kind of see a theme emerging here. But yes, this one is about Wallace, who is a hard-ass lawyer the typical didn't really live my life until I died kind of thing. He's taken to this tea shop run by Hugo, who is a ferryman, and he's supposed to guide him into the next world, basically. He's taken there by a reaper. She was the best. All the characters in this book are just fantastic. Hugo's grandpa is like top notch. There's also called a character called the manager, who is super interesting. Kind of reminded me of like a Terry Pratchett kind of thing, which I'll get to later, but yes. There is a gay romance in this. I love the dynamic between Wallace and Hugo. I thought they were adorable. I did find it a bit repetitive at times, like the conversations they would have. That's why I gave it 4 stars, but all in all, really loved it. I thought it felt like a very personal book for the author in the way that he described grief and the whole process of it. So yes, really loved it, made me cry. I also cried with How High We Go in the Dark. Again, I would probably tell you that I cried with most of these books, so get used to it. Then I read, oh, I actually do have this one physically, and that is The 13th Tale by Diane Satterfield. This is definitely a contestant for one of my favorite books of the whole year. I can already tell because I had such a reaction to it. Like I loved it. It's a typical book that I feel was written for me specifically. I've said this about many books, but still, I love it. This book is about, if you see my nose getting redder, it's because I think I'm getting another allergy attack, so yeah. So anyway, this book is about this very famous writer, but who has led a very mysterious life. Nobody knows what her life has been like until she contacts this very random amateur biographer, and she asks her to come to her house, listen to her story, and write it, basically. And we kind of go from there. So we follow like the 2 timelines of like Margaret discovering the whole story, listening to Miss Winters talk about her life, and you know, we go back in time to hear Miss Winters' life. The narration choices in this book are genius. They are like so they make the plot, basically. Once you get to the ending, you realize why those narration choices were made, and you're like, how did I not see this? The twists are just amazing. I can't with this book. I loved it. The mystery aspect of it is fantastic, as you don't really know what Miss Winter is going to tell Margaret. There's also a lot of exploration, again, about death and grief. And actually twins. Twins appear very prominently in this story, and I always find that fascinating. So yes, and also most importantly, stories and books and their power. There's a lot of reference to the classics. Yes, this book is perfect. I am in love with Diane Satterfield. Don't have anything else to say, I think. Moving on, I can put this down. Moving on, I read Gallant by B. Schwab, again, digitally. I read this in like a couple of days. I devoured it. It's actually quite short and it's very YA, so that's why, yeah. I was very excited for this book, and then I just I don't know. I think that the ending was kind of rushed. I think that kind of played a part in it, and it was very YA, and I have said many times that I am not a young adult anymore. But I would definitely recommend it to my students. So if any of my students are watching and you like fantasy and you would like to read about a girl who lives in an orphanage sort of thing, like a workhouse, because she's an orphan, and she suddenly gets a letter from her uncle telling her to come back home. She has a home, she has a family, she should come back. He has finally found her, etc. And yeah, it turns out that that house is like a portal, like a gate into another world, like the opposite kind of thing. And her family are the protectors, because if things from that world come into ours, everything would die, basically. I thought it was a really good story. I really enjoyed Olivia as a main character. I thought she was quite unique, and I really liked the illustrations in this story and how they play a part in the plot and in the story. So yes, I would definitely get a physical copy just for that, but it's not the book for me. I gave it 4 stars, but only because I mean, it was enjoyable, but if I had to do it for myself, the rating, I would give it a 3, probably. Oh my god, the next book, I'm so excited to talk about this, so get ready. So the next book I read was A Marvellous Light by Freya Marski. I'm still not sure I'm saying her name correctly, so I apologize. So I read this in 2 days. It was highly addictive. I loved it. Basically, you have this magical world crashing onto this unsuspecting, unmagical guy who works for the government, and he suddenly has to deal with magic, basically. And you have a very interesting magic system. It's based on this childhood game that I don't think I've ever heard about, but I think it's a very British thing, where children would make figures by interweaving a string and create figures with the fingers and the string. I don't know. So the magic kind of takes a root in that, basically. People do it just with their hands, but if you don't have a lot of power, you might need to be more precise and actually use a string, and that is like not seen as, if you have to do that, then you're not as good. It's just super interesting. So there's a lot of development on that, and like power and where the power comes from. Fascinating. And I loved our two main characters. I love the dynamic between them. Robin, who is the government worker who is not magical. He's this very outgoing, he's from the nobility. It contrasts really beautifully with Edwin, who is our magical guy. He's his counterpart. They are supposed to liaise about how the magical world can influence sometimes the non-magical world. Kind of like an Arthur Weasley, I would say. Yeah, sort of like that. But anyway, I loved it. I love this dynamic because, as I was saying, Edwin is like very nerdy and very unsociable, so yes. It also features a gay romance, so I love them. I am obsessed, and I can't wait for the next book, which comes out in November. Yes. I didn't mention what this book is actually about. So basically, Robin and Edwin have to investigate what happened to Robin's predecessor in his post at the government, because he's just disappeared. And well, we uncover a whole plot there. So it's very fast-paced, unputdownable. I just loved it. It's also heartwarming and funny, and yes, I'm obsessed. Want the next book. I didn't mention, this is historical fiction also. It's set in the 19th century in England, and I love it. Then, another physical book, thankfully. We've got Middlesex. Now, it's been a month since I've read this. I still don't know exactly what to say about this. This is a Pulitzer-winning book. Like, it's very, it's highly acclaimed. I'm not gonna say anything like groundbreaking about this book, but I just can't seem to articulate very well why I liked it, why I loved it. I gave it 5 stars, obviously. So let me just try to read what I wrote about it at the time, and maybe, I don't know. So this was one of the most intriguing and unique books. Like, the first paragraph alone just caught me, and I was like, yes, I need to read this. There's a lot of, since our main character and the family are Greek immigrants, it's just very Greek classically infused, I would say. So there's a lot of Homeric references all around, and I love it. And so that caught me from the beginning. Basically, we're following Cal, who was born as Callie, actually, and when she hits puberty, it's discovered that she's actually a hermaphrodite. So this is an intersex main character, which I don't think I've ever read before, and I found it fascinating. I thought that all the themes explored in this were just great, like adolescence and the puberty. That alone was just fantastic. But we start actually with the story of his grandparents and his parents, and because they're trying to explain like how genetically he is intersex, and it's fascinating. So we get a lot of history from his grandparents migrating from Greece and the war with Turkey to America, escaping all of that, and their lives as immigrants. There's a lot of talk about religion and their rituals, and yeah, and then we have their parents' love story, and finally we get to Cal. We also get glimpses into Cal's future as an adult, and some of it was kind of heartbreaking, but it feels hopeful at the end. So yes, I loved it. I've been rambling for like 5 minutes about this book already, so I'm just gonna move on, but definitely a new favorite. Yeah. Next, I read Thief of Time by Terry Pratchett, which was a great palate cleansing book after the intensity that was Middlesex. So this is part of the Discworld series by Terry Pratchett. If you don't know, it's a fantasy series, which like 30 something books, I don't even know how many they are. I've read like less than 10. What is really great about Terry Pratchett is that he is hilarious. He writes satire basically, so it's a fantasy world, but it's a commentary on humanity, and it's just hilarious. It's just great. The plot in this, as with most of the Terry Pratchett books I've read, especially the ones that involve death, it's very convoluted. Sometimes you're just like, am I following this correctly? Because we have tons of different characters, they're all rushing in to stop this clock being made that is going to stop time, and therefore is going to stop the universe. Like life is going to stop. So we have the monks of history trying to stop it, and we have Death and his granddaughter trying to stop it, and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse appear also. It's just, everything is brilliant. I loved it. Yeah, that's it. That's all Death's granddaughter is a teacher. I love her. Yes, Miss Susan, the best. I can't wait to pick up more of these books, but I can't find them in Uruguay. So if you're watching, bookshop people, please bring me more Terry Pratchett books. Thanks. All right, moving on. The last book I read in March was a highly anticipated book because I have owned this book for a while, and that is by Kazuo Ishiguro. It's An Artist of the Floating World. If you haven't watched my channel before, I love Kazuo Ishiguro. He's one of my all-time favorites. He publishes a book, I buy it, basically. I still have a bit of backlist to go through, but let's talk about this one. It's quite short. You get through it quite quickly. I read it in like 2 days, basically. It's about this old man in Japan. He was an artist during World War II, and he's reminiscing about his life and his role during the war. This is post-war. Did I mention that? This is post-World War II. So during the rebuilding and the American intervention, that kind of thing. It's a very introspective book. Like, you literally are just following this old man's ramblings into his memory, but you never get lost. Like, he goes back a few years and then he goes back even further and then comes back, and then, but you never get lost. You always know how the story is going, and you really get a sense of what his life was like and his life now and what he thinks about. I loved it. I also loved the insight into Japanese culture, again, especially the dynamics, the family dynamics, like the way that the daughters speak to their father. Yeah, I thought it was fascinating. It felt like the dialogue was being translated from Japanese, even though I'm pretty sure this was written directly in English, but like Kazuo Ishiguro has that, and it's just, yes, it's very idiosyncratic, very, yeah, I loved it. Don't have enough good things to say about Kazuo Ishiguro, so yeah, but I'll come back to him. So yeah, so that was the end of March. That was the 8 books I read, and then we move on to Once Upon a River, which is another book I have physically, thankfully, but I did read like half of this digitally before I actually got the physical copy. So Diane Setterfield makes a comeback. I love this book. I can't. So let me tell you briefly what it is about. Basically, we have this inn on the Thames, and this man appears with a dead girl in his arms, basically. But then, during the course of the night, the girl lives. Like, the girl is no longer dead. It's a mystery. And even more mysterious, the girl can't talk. She's like 4 years old. The girl can't talk, and there are 3 families claiming her. Like, it's their long-lost someone. So you gotta go from there. You follow all these different families and their struggles and what happened to them in the past, and now, you know, what's happening with this girl. And there's a lot of intrigue and mystery. This is also historical fiction. It's set in the 19th century as well, I think. Yeah, end of the 19th century, I would say. I don't think it's specified. And we have the river connecting all of these stories. There's something I didn't mention from the 13th Tale as well, which I'll go back to it. That there's this very ambiguous supernatural element that you're never really sure if it's actual supernatural, like are there actual ghosts in this story, or is it just people's imagination or something else that could be explained. And this also plays into that, and it's wonderful, and I love it. I was rooting for all of the characters, well, except the villains. Obviously there are villains in the story. And I really like the writing style. It's very dreamy. You feel like you're flowing in the river. I also really love the exploration on the theme of parenthood and what this child brings out in the different people that she meets. And yeah, I thought it was very touching and very beautiful to read about, and yeah, loved it. Also cried. What else is new? Then, next book I read in April is one of my most anticipated books of the year, and that is Sea of Tranquility by Emily St. John Mandel. I can't wait for my physical copy to get here already. But yes, I devoured this in 2 days as well. There's a whole reading vlog about this because I was on a trip, so it was great. This book is sci-fi. It follows 3 different timelines. One of them is the beginning of the 20th century. We have this man who enters a forest in Canada and he experiences something weird. He listens to music. He feels like he's no longer where he was. It lasts a couple of seconds. It leaves him very shocked, but yeah, that's it. That's all we get, basically. Then we have this writer way in the future. She's actually from a moon colony. And she has written a book about a pandemic, and there's a scene in her book where this actually happens, like this violin music and a man in a forest and that kind of thing, which is very mysterious, obviously, like how did this happen? And finally we have a man a bit further into the future who is investigating this for reasons. There's time traveling involved. I love it. So yes, I was hooked from the beginning. All the characters are super compelling. I really wanted to know how their stories would end, and the ending is very satisfying. It was another book about pandemics and grief and explorations on that, so yes. It was incredible. I loved it. Go read it. It's also very short. It's shorter than I thought, so beautiful book. And I would definitely suggest, if you haven't already, to read more of Emily St. John Mandel's books, especially The Glass Hotel and Station 11. Anyway, moving on. Then I read, we have the comeback of Mr. Kazuo Ishiguro. This is his latest novel. This is Klara and the Sun. This is about an AI. She's called an artificial friend. And her life's purpose is to be a companion to a child, basically, because we live in a dystopian world in this, although it's not really explained. It's just very ominous. It's just there. Nobody really talks about why. I mean, you get the picture, but it's not really outright explained, like why children need artificial friends. I love this. It's also quite short. I again devoured this in a couple of days, also in the reading vlog, which I'll link up there again, I don't know. And yes, it's full of insights into humanity because Klara is a really insightful AI, and so she keeps making observations about humans while she's in the store waiting to be bought and taken into a family, and then finally when she does get to her family. And it's very upsetting. I was tearing up multiple times. I found the exploration on themes of loneliness and what it is to be human, and all of that just... I love Kazuo Ishiguro. That I can't really say much more about it without spoiling things about it, so yeah, that's basically it. Go read it if you want to have your heart broken, I guess. That's not a ringing endorsement of the book, but I really loved it. 5 stars. All these books I've been talking about, by the way, have been 5 stars, in case you haven't been able to tell. I have already talked about how I gave 5 stars pretty liberally, but these are 5 stars. The next book I read was Mischief Acts by Zoe Gilbert. Put a picture up here. Cover, stunning. This book is the most unique book I've read, at least this year. I don't think I've ever read anything like this. So it was very intriguing because it's about a myth that I have never heard of before. It's an English myth of this man called Herne or Herne or Herne. I still don't know how to pronounce. I should have. found that out. I should have found that out before I started recording. Anyway, this book is about, it's a myth retelling basically. Well, yes, I would say it's just the story of the myth in a very unique way. So Herney is the leader of the wild hunt. He has antlers, like stag's antlers on his head for reasons that are explained in like the first story that we read. And that's the thing, like the book starts as if it was like a lecture by someone explaining the myth, and then we get into the stories. Each different story is narrated in a completely different way. It's prefaced by a chant of some sort, and yeah, it basically tells a story of the myth and how it evolves, and like the different people that he comes into contact with. All the narration styles are different. I was fascinated. I was completely fascinated. And what is super interesting is that it starts in like the 13th century where the myth appears, and it jumps ahead every couple of decades or a bit more maybe through the centuries, and then we get to contemporary times, and then we jump into the future. And it's like an exploration of what the myth would turn into in the future. And it's very much linked, since Herney lives in the south, I think it was the south forest, like around London or around that area, which has been greatly diminished throughout the industrial period, obviously. But it's very much linked with nature and climate change and all of that. So it was just fascinating. It was a really fascinating book. I can't wait to read more by this author. I think she has another book previous to this one, and definitely gonna be picking it up. It made me want to believe in things, and I am an atheist. Like, honestly, it has like many different genres also. There's a touch of horror. Yeah. Fascinating. Extremely well done. Yeah, it was a great book. And the last book I read in April, we're getting to the end here, I promise, is Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr, never know how to say his name, sorry. This has been greatly hyped, and for a good reason. I loved it. I gave it 5 stars. So in this one, we again follow different timelines. We have 2 children in Constantinople during a siege. Then we also, in like the 15th century, then we also have another 2 kids in contemporary USA, starting like in the 40s, I think, and then we go from there until the present time. And then we have this girl who is on a spaceship in the future, traveling to another planet, because yeah, we have completely messed Earth up. What connects all these stories is a play by a Greek master, Diogenes, I think it was, which is a fictional play, it's not a real one, and how this play has touched all these different kids throughout history, and how this story was preserved, and the rediscovery of it, and how, oh my god, I can't talk about it. It's just amazing. I loved it. I loved how we see like all these periods of history through the eyes of kids, which is not something that you usually see, and as an adult I really like having that perspective, especially because children, even though all these characters are around the same ages, at least when we start with each one of them, they are obviously treated differently, because kids through different periods of history have been treated differently, and like children in the 15th century had to work. I thought it was fantastic. I thought all the plot was very well executed. It jumps around a lot, which I think might be a bit jarring for people. Like, you get one chapter of one character and then you jump to another one, and you always want more, but I think that's what made it so easy to read for me, and I never really got confused. And we also get to see this wonderful, ridiculous play invented throughout the story. It's a very magical tale of this man who lives a year as a donkey, a year as a fish, and then as a bird, and then, yeah, it's just... I was tearing up by the end. I read like the last 40% of this book in bed, because I could not stop reading it. I had to finish it, and I cried throughout the last 20%, I think, like tearing up every once in a while. I thought the ending was really hopeful. Yeah, it touches a lot on a lot of different topics, like war, and then when we get to the contemporary side, like climate change and mental illness, PTSD, that kind of thing. It was great. It was the type of book for me. I know. I keep saying that. I've been talking non-stop for 35 minutes. So those are the books I read in March and April. I'm gonna close my journal now so I can show you the little stack of books that I own physically. But yeah, this is a stack, and obviously all the digital ones. So yeah, there's like 7 more. I am very pleased with my reading this last couple of months. Let me know what you have read these last couple of months, what has been your favorite, your least favorite, if you have read any of these and what you thought of them. I don't know, just leave me a comment down below so we can talk more about these books, because as you can tell by the length of this video, I want to talk about these books. Or any book, really. I'm not picky. I am very picky with what I read though. That's it for me, I think. My cat now has the hiccups. Anyway, that's it for me. Leave me a like if you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to subscribe to see how, you know, May goes. I have invented a TBR game. In case you haven't seen it, you can go check that out. It's Friends inspired, so if you like Friends, you might like to watch me playing that game. And that's it. I'll see you in the next one. Bye. Happy reading.